grooming gangs. It's a narrative that is done in order to sow division. And we must prevent that.
Then the MP was about children actually being violently raped and abused by grooming gangs when no one was willing to prosecute them. But
how can someone in Parliament look at the extensive evidence, court cases and testimonies about grooming gangs and call it a false narrative? What world are they living in where documented crimes against children are dismissed as political fabrication?
The right-wing media and those that seek to undermine, they are using a false narrative, and there's nothing new in that.
Today we're examining the truly disgraceful speech from a pro-Gaza MP that has sparked outrage across Britain. If you're concerned about politicians rewriting reality to fit their agenda, you need to hear what was said in this closed-door meeting with British Pakistani politicians. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favour. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now back to the video. What we're witnessing here is a shocking dismissal of victims' suffering that exposes a troubling pattern in British politics. This MP's characterisation of grooming gangs as a false narrative isn't merely inaccurate. It actively undermines years of criminal investigations and judicial proceedings that have established these crimes as a grim reality across the United Kingdom.
Looking at everything that's happened all across Britain, how can we understand why this happened, whether it's still happening?
Let's be crystal clear about what's happening. By framing legitimate concerns about organised sexual exploitation as merely a divisive political tactic, this parliamentarian has created a dangerous false equivalence between documented criminal activity and political advocacy. It reveals either a profound ignorance of the facts or something potentially more sinister, a deliberate attempt to misdirect public attention away from crimes that have devastated communities. The MP's comments strike at the very foundation of justice in our society. By dismissing these cases as essentially fictional, they're not just contradicting police investigations and court cases, they're effectively telling thousands of victims that their traumatic experiences don't matter, or worse yet, never happened.
In front of Labour MPs branding the outrage over Britain's grooming gangs as a false right-wing narrative.
This kind of denial sends a chilling message to current and future victims. Reporting these crimes might be pointless because even elected officials may not believe you. The most disturbing aspect of the MP's rhetoric is how it potentially shields perpetrators by creating a climate where accusations are met with scepticism rather than support. When a Member of Parliament suggests these investigations are politically motivated rather than evidence-based, they indirectly provide cover for criminals who prey on vulnerable young people.
Grooming gangs. It's a narrative that is done in order to sow division. And we must prevent that.
This denial is particularly damaging when considered alongside comprehensive investigations like the J Report. Published in 2014, this report meticulously documented widespread institutional failures in Rotherham, where over 1,400 children suffered sexual exploitation between 1997 and 2013. How can anyone dismiss this as a false narrative when the evidence is so overwhelming and the consequences so devastating? The timing of these comments couldn't be more inappropriate. Even as this MP was speaking, investigations continue to uncover new cases across multiple British cities, highlighting the persistent nature of these crimes and the ongoing struggle for justice.
The grooming gang scandal is a stain on our country. Local reviews in Rochdale, Rotherham and Telford expose the systematic rape, abuse and...
Victims are still coming forward, perpetrators are still being prosecuted, and communities are still grappling with the aftermath of these systematic abuses. What's particularly alarming is how this MP has attempted to reframe public concern about these crimes as merely a tool to divide communities. This perspective completely ignores the central issue: the devastating impact these crimes have had on victims, particularly young girls from disadvantaged backgrounds who are failed by the very institutions meant to protect them. By suggesting parliamentarians have failed to counter this false narrative, the MP ironically touches on a truth, though not the one intended.
Is to make sure that the moment a false narrative is arisen, that we address it immediately.
The real failure of Parliament has been in properly addressing these crimes for decades, allowing perpetrators to operate with relative impunity while victims suffered in silence. The institutional reluctance to confront these issues head-on has only compounded the trauma experienced by survivors. The consequences of such rhetoric extend far beyond political debate. When elected officials dismiss well-documented crimes, they create an environment where victims feel silenced and abandoned by those in power. This discourages reporting, shields perpetrators, and ultimately isolates those who have already suffered unimaginable trauma. The MP's words don't exist in a vacuum. They have real-world impacts on how these cases are perceived, investigated, and prosecuted. This represents a dangerous pattern where political ideology and concerns about community relations take precedence over the welfare of vulnerable citizens. While community cohesion is undoubtedly important, it cannot come at the expense of justice for victims of serious crimes. True healing and unity can only emerge from honest acknowledgement and accountability, not from sweeping uncomfortable truths under the rug.
Then the MP was about children actually being violently raped and abused by grooming gangs when no one was willing to prosecute them. But
the focus should always remain on the victims, ensuring they receive justice and support, rather than on political narratives that might be more comfortable or convenient. By shifting attention away from the victims and toward political messaging, this MP has effectively prioritised politics over people, ideology over individuals who have suffered real harm. We must ask ourselves, what message does this send to the thousands of young people who have been victimised? When their experiences are dismissed as political fabrications by those in positions of power, how can they possibly have faith in the system that's meant to protect them? This isn't just a question of political rhetoric. It's about whether our society is willing to confront difficult truths and stand up for its most vulnerable members. In a society built on justice, elected officials who dismiss horrific crimes as mere false narratives commit a betrayal beyond politics. This Pakistani MP has essentially told thousands of victims their trauma doesn't deserve acknowledgement, a devastating message that reinforces why so many remain silent. True healing requires honest confrontation with uncomfortable truths, not sweeping them aside for political convenience or community harmony.
Exploitation of vulnerable young women and girls by organised gangs, almost all of them British Pakistani men.
By dismissing these experiences, this MP actively prevents the very healing process their community needs. The path forward demands supporting victims, holding perpetrators accountable, and implementing preventative measures, not pretending the problem doesn't exist. Without acknowledgement, there can be no justice, and without justice, no healing.